shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, this little light of mine. I'm gonna let it shine, let it shine, let it shine, let it shine.
So this week, we really continue Jesus' same conversation from last week. This conversation about abiding. Now, last week, when we began to unfold it, I had the great big branch in here. And the kids talked about what sort of fruit might be on that branch. But when I asked the kids if we left the branch here, if it was going to produce anything, they immediately knew that it could not, because it no longer was abiding with its life source. Abiding. For the second half of the sermon last week, I used the presiding bishop's language to unpack abiding. We are Christ's church. We are Lutheran. We are church together, and we are church for the sake of the world. Again, how that abiding begins and continues to work in and through us all the way out the door. So today, our abide conversation continues. But today we're going to unpack it as we think about how and who and why. So there's your roadmap for the message today. Now, the how begins at the very beginning of today's message. A little bitty word, as. As God has loved me, Jesus says, I have loved you. So that little bitty word, as, gives us two places to plunge in. First of all, as Jesus outlines it right there, reminds us that this work of abiding always begins with the divine. As God has loved me, Jesus says, I have loved you. And it doesn't end there, because as we have been loved, a call is placed upon us as well. As. It begins with the divine. Now, there's another important element of as, because as is also absolutely relational. God in relationship with God's self, the as, then God coming to us to be in relationship with us as, and we then are called and sent to be in relationship. How, as, who. Jesus puts it out there plain and simple. Jesus says, you did not choose me. I have chosen you. There is so much decisional language in the church these days. I was at the prayer gathering down at the park this week, and the piece of music was, I have decided to follow Jesus. And meanwhile, this week's sermon is already playing in my head. We have a God who comes and finds and chooses us. It's not about us being in the right place at the right time. It's not about us figuring out the right equation. It's not about us being acceptable or meriting or earning or deserving. Jesus comes and finds us and chooses us. So next week is confirmation. And we have 4 students who will be affirming their baptismal vows. And when they do that in this place, we always ask them to create some sort of a mission statement. Some of them will be art and they will be music, but the mission statement has to have, faith statement. The faith statement has to have some very particular pieces embedded in it. Something about the Father, the Son, and the Spirit. Something about how God has come in and touched their life. But the most important element is, I ask them for good news. And I remind them that good news is never about what we have done. Good news is about what God has done and what God is doing and what God will do. Jesus says, you did not choose me. I have chosen you. Now, unfortunately, anybody that's been in the church any length of time has heard all kinds of awful jokes about the frozen chosen, or the chosen frozen. I don't know which way it is. Unfortunately, too often there's some truth to those frozen chosen jokes, that we get stuck, or we like to do things the way we've always done things. You know those language that we can't possibly do that. We've never done it that way before. I think Lutherans have fallen into frozen chosenness because we've been so afraid that anything we did would look like works righteousness. We'll sit on our hands and not do anything. It's very clear that our chosenness has nothing to do with frozenness. That is not God's plan. It's not a game of freeze tag, that as soon as somebody touches you, that's it, end of game, no more movement. Not God's plan. In the fall of 2017, so just last fall, the bishop, David Browriki, asked all of the churches in Oregon to enter into a vitality study. By a glitch of computers, I didn't get our vitality study back until Monday. Sunday, I was at the event at Grace when they began unpacking those vitality studies, and then I saw ours on Monday. Now, the vitality study was asked of all of Oregon to do that, and some of the information is what people self-reported back, and then there's some conclusions. But in the Oregon Synod, the Congregational Vitality Study, the congregations self-reported. This is internal information. Nobody from the Synod or outside is making this information. Congregations self-reported. And 65% of the congregations in Oregon say that they are focused on maintenance ministry. Just keeping it on the tracks. 20% say, self-report, that they are both vital and sustainable, that there are energized ministries going on, they're reaching out to their community, and that they can continue along this path. 15% of the churches in Oregon report that they are in crisis or decline. Now, the thinkers say that within 3 to 5 years, probably half of the congregations that are on maintenance mode, because they're on maintenance mode, will have fallen to crisis or decline mode. Now, who's wondering? Where are we? What do you think? We're vital and sustainable. We are vital and sustainable. That is how you self-reported. Vital and sustainable. Abiding, accepting the gifts, using the gifts. Vital and sustainable. Now, the people that were watching this and looking at this study made some conclusions. Now, for the churches that are focused on maintenance ministry, what they found is that their leadership was largely risk adverse, which meant status quo, which meant stuck, which will very likely mean sinking the ship. Churches that self-reported as vital and sustainable, report that their leadership inspires people to take action. And that there's the rest of the sentence. That's mostly associated with vital and growing congregations. And again, this is where Immanuel self-reported itself to be. As we have been loved, we are called to love. We who have been chosen have not been chosen to be frozen. We have been chosen because God has got work and ministry for us to do here in this place, and most certainly right outside of those doors. So the last piece is the why. Because you see, God doesn't rain down God's gifts for them simply to accumulate and sit and rest. We are called to bear fruit. And in fact, it isn't even just a call in today's gospel. Jesus commands that we love our neighbor. Who is our neighbor? The person who needs us the most. So today, as we think of abide, as we think of the richness of what it means to be loved and chosen, I'm going to let the bishop's words ring one more time. We are Christ's church. We are Lutherans who have been called and forgiven and showered with grace, such that we can be the church together, even when it's messy, because we're elbows and knees and a left hand and a right brain. And we are called to be church for the sake of a world who is dying for the good news. Amen.
Well, this light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. This light of mine, I'm gonna let it shine. And every day, every day, every day, every day, every day, I let my little light shine. Oh, Jesus gave me light, I'm gonna let